You're muted. There you go.
Good evening. We're here for the full agenda for the night. We'll start with the review of the minutes from January 4th. Did anyone have any comments on the minutes? Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the review of the school lunch fund profit and loss statement, December through January. Robin, you can cover those?
Sure.
Thank you.
So as expected, for December, there was a realized loss of $10,025. The revenues were about $8,500 less than December of 19. The expenses were about $3,500 more than December of 19. So at this point, we're showing a loss of $61,006 through December. Fund balance started at almost 49,000. So the true fund balance at this point is about $12,000 negative. Claims continue to do the same thing. Our average daily participation for lunch is actually gone down from last December, and the daily participation for breakfast has increased almost 150%. Similar results for January. We're looking at a loss of about $10,000. Revenues in January of 2020 were about $18,500 more, and January of 2020 expenses were about $10,000 more, showing a loss of $71,346 through January of 2021, leaving us a fund balance of about $22,000 in the negative. Claims, again, lunch claims, daily participation continues to go down, and breakfast continues to go up. Does anybody have any questions?
So I'm afraid my fifth grader may be contributing to the breakfast participation going up because he's discovered that his surname was crushed. But
We're serving everybody.
I was going to say, other than my kid, to what do you attribute the increase in participation?
The structure of the morning. So the way that the morning is structured, the kids are geared towards those areas. And also what Paul has done in the middle school and high school is he has to-go bags. So he puts these to-go bags up, and as the kids are walking through the hallway, they're encouraged to take one. So we're feeding every kid upon entry. So they have a sealed bag, the kid grabs the bag, Paul then marks down who's taking that bag, so then we can claim it. And then, so therefore we are increasing our breakfast by doing it that way. So he's been able to be able to increase our revenue on that and increase the amount of kids who are getting fed. So it's not a bad thing.
Does a later start time beginning at the elementary school help?
I'm not exactly sure at the elementary. I'm only talking middle school, high school.
Oh, okay.
Because I will tell you, middle school, high school, that's how he's got the bags. And I know that that's definitely increased our abilities. The elementary school, I have to know if those numbers went up. Robin, did our numbers increase at the elementary school, or is it delineated that way at all?
And this is a combined, I don't know
Okay.
which school is which as far as the ADP goes. I could probably find it out if you're really interested.
No, I don't think you need to.
Okay.
Further. I think your explanation, Frank,
Yeah.
sounds like it's accounting for most of
Yeah.
what we're saying.
And unfortunately, the dwindling aspect is because of the rotations in the high school. Our elementary numbers are higher. So as we were tracking the amount of kids who are getting lunch in the elementary school, there's more. Our high school, unfortunately, and middle school are less because of the numbers that we have on a daily basis. So, but I will tell you, my son recently found out that they have it, and like that it's free. And my son has celiac disease, so the fact that he feels comfortable eating here, and it's gluten-free. I mean, it's a shameless plug for our cafeteria, but still, Robin laughs. But
Paul
I
would be happy.
realize that it's free, and now he can eat here safely. He's been eating every day for the past 3 weeks. So.
And my grandson loves it too.
And mine loves the cinnamon too. All right, okay, let's move on to the claims auditor reports. Francine, Jen?
I'm here. I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up with the last meeting that we had in January, the Smart Care Solutions. That was the one in which they wanted 3 items repaired in the kitchen and only 2 of them were done. As a follow-up, one of our vendors had given us a small cooler, so we do not need that mini fridge at this point. And then as far as going forward, we only really had one exception. Since that last meeting, the Pittsfield one happened in December, and I originally had thought that was on a purchase order, but that as I delved into it more, it was not, so that I had added that December 15th one. So at this point, we only have 2 exceptions and 3 other issue type items. And some opportunities that I see, and I believe Jim is working on some of these, is warranty retention. It appears that some of these exceptions are thinking that we have a warranty on an item and calling it in without a purchase order and then finding out we don't have a warranty on them. So that was one area I feel that we have opportunity to see improvement on. And then also maybe looking into what vendors have a minimum order requirement as far as shipping costs. Because there was one here for Fisher Scientific. For example, we ordered an item that was $29 and we had to pay a $15 shipping fee. So maybe if we find out if there is a minimum order amount and maybe educate and let individuals know that we are waiting, or unless the item is definitely necessary, maybe lumping a couple of orders together to avoid those fees. That's all I'm seeing at this point. I'm not sure if anyone has questions in regards to, I'm not sure what you guys have in front of you, but.
If I could, I'd like to talk about at least the warranty issue. So we're working through a process to do a full valuation of all the assets of the district at this point. And one of the items within the new system is that you'll be able to put documents in there. So whenever we receive a new item that has any kind of warranty, we'll put that document there so it'll easily be accessible so that we can see whether or not there is an actual warranty.
Okay, anyone have questions on any of those? All right. Thanks, Francine.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, I think you've got the next item, duties of the claims auditor position.
Yes. So in looking at everything going on, I have been looking at every position, and one of the things I've been doing is saying, okay, who knows whose position and how can we expand that? So I'm working on that with the business office staff. So with a claims auditor, there are certain minimum requirements. And Francine does that very well for the purchasing packets, where she reviews everything, goes through and makes sure there's a requisition purchase order, make sure it matches up with what has been ordered and what has been received, and any changes are actually noted and approved. That's great. We also have her review payroll here, and that's a little unusual. I did have that in my prior district as well, but the role is very different here versus there. Here, Francine has the entire personnel packet with all of the personal information in it, to review, and that, after my experience with the comptrollers reviewing personally identifiable information in my last district, the last time I had an audit, they're very concerned about people having access to information that they don't absolutely need. So the way I'm looking at it, and this is something that you as the board have to direct Francine on, so I'm bringing it to your attention, is generally, as long as you have a board action that justifies whatever it is, the hiring of the person or the pay of the person or changes in pay, that's generally sufficient to prove that they're able to receive the paycheck that they're receiving. So it's a matter of what level we want Francine to delve into personnel folders and have access to personally identifiable information.
So in terms of a board action to make a resolution, do we have to amend the duties description? What steps do we need to take to fix that?
I would want to look at that. Francine, maybe you can speak to that.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the end part very well. I guess I wanted to just clarify that my role in payroll is just to really look at the payroll every 2 weeks, not delve completely into it. I'm looking in general, and I'm looking at overtime and extra hours. As far as going into files, the only time I'm going into that is probably 2 to 3 times a year to look at just new employee files. So, and I'm looking for certain things like the W-4, were they offered the retirement, were they offered the 403B, do they have a fingerprinting in the file? So it's basically looking to see if their new paperwork was followed through on, an I-9. As far as everything else in the file, I'm really not looking at that. I'm looking at a salary statement, but that goes with looking at payroll as well. So I guess my role in looking at files at this point, I feel is minimum. It's about 10 hours a year, to be honest with you. And I find maybe 20% of things that maybe are missing. So whether you feel that this is worth it or not, but it's 10 hours a year, and it's just looking at new employee files at this point. I'm not just picking someone's file out and looking at it during the routine payroll.
Understandable.
Okay.
And that's, to my way of thinking, that's more of a business office secondary review kind of item rather than a claims auditor item. So that's where I'm having my question, and that's why I'm bringing it to the board, as they are your supervisors.
Okay.
Right, so it sounds to me like this is something that there's a legitimate business purpose for you to have to go into some personnel folders, right? So it would be, I think we'd want to memorialize that your access to those files is on a need to know basis, right? And to perform your duties. And I think if we had something that approved of that access, that would do it.
Can I also state, as Jim said, not often do you have things that are going into personnel files to look at things, even those like that. And as we're talking about procedures and protocols, putting in place in like layers, that's what Jim is looking at and kind of mentioning is maybe we can take that function and instead of it having to be the claims auditor, we do a multi-layered business office approach where we say, does this person have this, check this, check this. So then as they're hiring, we're doing it, so we're not going into a personnel file, we're not pulling that information, or if we have to do that and we want her to review it, find another place to house that before it goes into the personnel file. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, so then if it goes into there and Francine wants to audit, we're not going through someone's file first. It's already set aside. It's there. She has the pertinent information to go through. It gets checked and then it gets filed into the personnel file.
Right.
I just would rather see, personnel files are very, those are the one things that, you can't see unless there's a requirement to see them. There's very specific aspects of it. So if we have to go into it for a specific reason, I'd rather have a protocol first set up so we don't ever have to open that file before.
Right, so that's the first question is, do we have an existing procedure for access to personnel files?
We do.
Okay, does it
And
cover Francine?
it does not.
Okay, so that's what we need to fix.
Yep.
Then. Okay, so that sounds like it's procedural though, and
Correct.
you can fix it.
Yep.
All right, okay, so I guess, it would be, I think, our recommendation to make that change so that we establish a procedure that allows her to have access so that she's not accessing them outside of procedure.
Yeah, we'll create a file that she goes, so when they're hired, it goes to her first. She sees all that information, checks off on it with the checks and balance sheet, and then it goes into the personnel file. So it actually takes all that away from it. I think that makes the most sense.
That does, I agree.
Jim, does that make sense? Francine, does that make sense?
It does. I'm still questioning on whether, do I need to look at these new employee files for all this information, or do we have, I think at the time that they established this, maybe there wasn't someone else in the business office, maybe they wanted a checks and balance, and that's why they gave it to the auditor. I don't know. Now you have, a payroll clerk and another human resource person, I believe that's their title. Do you need me to look at new employee files for the extent of seeing if we have all this paperwork in there? I mean, I don't mind doing the payroll. I don't really need to go through these files if you don't feel the need. I just don't know what the procedure is now. But I do find some errors where, maybe there's not a fingerprinting, or maybe there's not something, but it is, again, only 20% of the time, and I'm only in there probably about 10 hours a year. But I just don't know if that is a claims auditor function, or if it should be something housed in the business office. And maybe we don't have the employee staffing to do that, and that's why the claims auditor is doing it.
And that may have been the case in the past. I believe at this point, I would want to establish a procedure not only where everyone's cross-training and understanding everyone else's role in the business office, but also that we do have those checks and balances within those roles. So that was why I brought it up, to talk about that and understand what the parameters are.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, having a claims auditor involved in that process before we're authorizing payroll to an employee and making sure that we've met our legal requirements in terms of securing a properly completed I-9 and fingerprints and any other, things that we need to have in place before we're going to authorize payroll, I think makes sense. Whether that's a claims auditor's role, or we come up with some other way to separate duties to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. I don't think it has to be claims auditor, but somehow we need some checks and balances to make sure that we have everything we need to have before we authorize payroll. Because otherwise we have a risk to the district.
Jim and I are talking about the recommendation to do what he's talking about and create those protocols within the business office to make sure that we have those, because we talked about this, the checks and balances, doing it. I think it can be done without having the claims auditor doing those things. I mean, who does them? To me, it just doesn't matter as long as we get them done correctly and appropriately. And if someone's not available to do it, we have someone to do it for us. That's the other issue is, right now, we are so centralized within our business office that if someone's not here, we fall apart. So, it's that multi-training and multi-attachment. So having this book of checks and balances for us is going to be more important to make sure that we're really leveled on what we're doing.
I got a naive question. Is there somebody who's in charge of human resources?
We don't have a human resource department, and we talked about that. We hired somebody to be able to help us go through it. Currently, I'm still the human resource director for the district.
Who is?
Well, me and Jim, we share those.
Share that duty? Okay. So that seems to me this belongs as an HR function.
Yep. And that's where Jim wanted to kind of take this.
So Jim, just to close on the prior audit you mentioned from the comptroller's office, did the solution that you're suggesting, would that be comported with the comptroller's recommendations?
Yes, the recommendation was to limit access to as few people as possible. And so I believe that if we can consolidate it in the business office, it does accomplish that.
Okay.
And I think, this is going back years now, and Jim, you might remember too, but I think at one time, there were just some issues, and it might have been staffing, and then Francine was given all these random different things to do. So I don't think that was ever in writing or in any kind of job description. So, it certainly should be reevaluated, but I think that was it when Francine first came aboard, right, Francine? It was sort of like a conversation rather than...
Yes, and I feel as though that internal audit we did in 2011, 12 timeframe before I started prompted a lot of my responsibilities, and it was just thrown all these random stuff at me, and I just didn't, so I kind of just went with it and did it. But I'm not sure if that pertains now or if we're looking to change stuff. I'm willing to change. I just want to be involved in the process if that's what we're going to do. If you feel as though the business office, there's a checks and balance in there, then, you know, I'm okay with that. It's only, you know, it's 10 hours. So I'm flexible, you know, with however they want to proceed with this. The only thing, you know, I may need is access to is the salary statements if I look at the payroll, you know, at the beginning of the school year is what we, there's a lot on the change report as far as the payroll happens at the beginning of the school year. So, but that would limit, I don't go into files for that. It's really just the salary statements that are kept
No,
in separate file.
I think it's a really good idea, because I think that the internal auditor never really has had a good job description, right, Betsy? It's sort of kind of hit and go.
Yeah, I agree. I was, when I first got here, I was really pulling teeth to get a job description. And I just have a bunch of random pieces of paper saying what I'm supposed to do. So it would be probably nice to get something in place to see exactly what you want me to do. Maybe things have changed from back then. And, you know, some things, right. Some things may be necessary. Some things may be necessary still, and some may not. So I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And now the full board is part of the audit committee. Back then, it was only 3 people. I just remember hearing the results of the audit committee. It was, we didn't have a quorum, so there was only 3 people who sat on the audit committee. So this is another good reason why it's one united committee, because so many things fall under audit. So.
And there has to be consistency that historically has been overlooked on many occasions and caused a lot of problems.
Right.
So it would be great if we could put something together that really works and it's consistent going forward. And we have to look at that somehow.
Definitely.
Yeah, so Jim, Francine, thanks for raising this topic for discussion. I would like for you guys to report back and have time to think about which functions belong where and how you want to structure it. And I think it makes sense. I mean, part of our function as the audit committee is to participate in internal audit, to review claims. So I think having a clear understanding as to what specific duties are for the claims auditor is something that we should have a view into once you've taken some time to sort of.
We have to work with Francine.
Will this still allow Francine access to those files if she needs to have access?
If there was any specific item that was required for her audit, I would say yes. It's just a matter of determining whether or not those things would be required. That's a discussion that Francine and I will have and go through the whole process, because we're trying to document everything in the business office to make sure we know exactly what's going on. And that would be one of those things.
I guess I just want to make sure that she has the tools to do her job and has access to information to do her job. And as long as you guys work that out, sounds like it'd be fine. But I don't want her to be stifled in the, don't want her to be stifled that I can't do what I'm supposed to do because the information is not available to me. We haven't solved anything.
So it sounds like the things we need to do, or really Jim, you're gonna take the lead on, is working through the claims auditor duties, right? Some specific duties that fall under the claims auditor. And then from earlier, we were talking about the procedure for access to personnel folders, and it sounds like that needs a tweak, at least in writing procedure, to allow Francine access to these documents to the extent she needs them to perform her duties. Because at this point, that's not documented anywhere in the procedure, correct?
And we will document along with every other process in the business office to make sure that we have records for everything and that we have processes for everything and everyone's cross-trained as far as they possibly can.
Okay, great.
Artie, if we're going to take something, let's say, off of Francine's plate as we were talking about, we are going to write that also and give you the control aspect of that, of what we're taking away and then how the control is going to be put in place. So it's just like, you know, if we're talking about something that Francine did, because Francine will tell you, we've had a lot of conversations about the clutter and uncertainty of what her job role is. And we've talked about this. That's what kind of prompted this is, what do she need to do? How do we help her better? And how do we make that business office really effective? And so whatever we do decide, I think we should also bring the control aspect of what we put in its place and how that's going to function. So that way it's very clear to everyone what the roles are and how we're keeping track of everything.
Yep, I agree. Okay. All right, so we'll look forward to hearing what you guys come up with. Great. All right, anyone else have anything on that claims auditing topic? Okay, good. All right, so let's move on to the audit committee charter. So I did receive comments on the charter from Rachel, Cindy, and Tricia. So let me just run through, and I'm sorry I didn't circulate a revised document yet, but I will do that after tonight and before the next meeting. So, just in terms of the mission of the board, there were some comments. We talked about this in the last meeting. One of the statements is assist the board in providing oversight of the internal and external audit functions. So there, we discussed in the last meeting that we don't really provide oversight. These functions sort of run themselves. I think we need a new word there, and I'm suggesting advice and guidance. And then including recommendation, it currently says including the appointment of the internal and external auditors. We don't appoint, I guess we can, but really what we're doing is making recommendations to the board, the full board, even though the full board is here, for the appointment of the internal and external auditors. We talked about, and I got a couple of comments on this, the composition of the board. Tricia suggested that we change it to, instead of 3 members, at least 3 board members. And I wanted to clarify, and this is something Cindy, you commented on, whether we have external members. I made an edit to say, in addition to at least 3 board members, the board may appoint committee members who are not board members who meet the membership requirements below. And that's where we get into some of the duties of good faith and independence and that sort of thing. I don't think anyone was in favor of taking that language out. We did talk about whether it should come out. But from the comments I received, most people were not opposed to, at some point potentially, having external members if we thought we needed them to satisfy some of the requirements specific to the audit committee's functions. There was language, the committee members collectively should possess knowledge about accounting, auditing, etc. I changed that to committee members will review accounting, auditing, and financial reporting regarding school district finances and should possess the requisite skills to understand and evaluate the school district's financial statements, the external audit of those statements, and the district's internal audit activities. And then I added a sentence to address a comment from Tricia about training on these topics. I think when you become a new board member, you get the school finances training, but that's, one few-hour session and may not be enough. So I added, members of the Board of Education receive training on these matters, which may be supplemented through internal and external trainings or resources to ensure committee members are able to carry out their duties and responsibilities. So just a generic statement that training is provided, but if we need more, we can ask for it to make sure that we can carry out our function. Let's see. In terms of the internal audit focus, Tricia made the point, how do we actually do things like assist in the oversight of the internal audit function, monitor implementation of the internal auditor's recommendations. So I think I'll make some changes in that section too, but I think it is a good question to ask ourselves in terms of how are we actually carrying out these functions? Should we be doing more? You know, is what we're doing sufficient? But I don't think that necessarily requires changes to the document. It's just something I think for us to think about. Okay, I added to address the concerns about the quorum, the fact that we're all here. The audit committee is an advisory committee. Any matter before the audit committee requiring a decision will be brought to the Board of Education for review and any appropriate next steps. I think that covers some of the confusion around the fact that we now consist of the full board, or at least currently. Let's see. So Tricia made a comment in the reporting requirements section. It says the audit committee shall report to the board on an as-needed basis, but not less than annually. And I think Tricia was suggesting that since we're all on the committee, do we need to report to the board? Yeah, I'm in favor of leaving this in because this is a committee, it's not the full board. And I think when we're reporting out to the public on the activities of our committees in the context of a public board meeting, we should still have that report out.
I think too, in the future, right now, we are all members of this committee, but maybe there would be a future board member who would not like to. I mean, so like, do we make this a requirement? Like nowhere in education law or anywhere else is a requirement that all board members are a member of the audit committee. So if it's not, I think the report to the board is absolutely appropriate to be there. Maybe you know, Tricia, maybe next year you don't want to do the audit committee anymore. Maybe, you know, like not that it's happening, but it seems to make sense to leave the optionality there. Sort of, I see it kind of the same way as with the other members, right? We're not doing anything with it right now, but might in the future. So why block ourselves out?
Yeah, I think so too. Plus, I think that you know, the public report out in the context of a full board meeting is a good thing. The charter as written requires that we, the audit committee, shall assess and report to the Board of Education on the adequacy of the charter as necessary. Charter modifications as recommended by the audit committee should be presented to the Board of Education in public session for review and action. So I will circulate this revised draft with the comments so everyone has the context of the discussion before our next board meeting. And I'm happy to meet again next month. We have the meeting, I believe, scheduled. And then we can move it along next board meeting if we want, or I'll follow your lead, Cindy, in terms of when we calendar this.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we won't need a whole hour audit committee, maybe
No, I
just
don't
be
think we
like 15 minutes before and
Exactly.
review it, just so it keeps moving forward.
Exactly.
Does that work for people?
I think that would work.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds
I
good.
think that wraps up our,
RG, can I make a suggestion?
yes.
Jim and I actually wanted to go over the function summary in the audit, since that was a new document that we're sharing tonight. And we have time before the next board meeting. It would be possible for us to go through that now and start talking about it? If that's all right with everybody, the function summary, that was a part of the agenda. We really did want to actually do here.
Part of the budget.
Yes.
Yeah, might as well.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's only
Yes, that is a new document that,
It was attached to the.
it was attached, yeah, that is a document that Jim and I were working on, and we wanted to share here so you have a better understanding of the working of the budget.
Yep.
And I don't think you guys have seen a function summary before, or been, we didn't talk about it last year, I know that. Jim, you want to share it? There it is, look at that. All right, Jim, your show.
Let me make sure I can put it full screen so it's a little easier to read. So this document is the function summary, and basically after the fund level, so your general fund, your cafeteria fund, your grants fund, etc., you break it down into function level. So function 1010, for example, is Board of Education, and all of the expenses of the Board of Education are trapped there. So each 4-digit code has a specific identifier. So you can go down to, say, middle of the page, 2110, teaching regular school. And that's where all of your regular education expenses are housed. So what we decided to do was to give you a little different flavor from the one page that we provided that's very much summary. It has very little detail. Give you more detail to review, okay, in Board of Education, the amount we projected last year for the budget is the same as the amount projected for this year, so there's no change there. Or you go down a couple lines and you see a slight change, which is going to be a salary change. So you can go through each of the lines and look at what the general changes are from the expenses of the prior 5 years, the current year's budget, and the projected budget for next year. Using that information, we can drill down and say, okay, looking at this, obviously our largest increase in the budget is going to be in 2110, teaching regular school, with a slightly smaller increase in 2250, which is the next line down, which is special education. So there are some significant changes here that you can review, and we'd be happy to answer any questions on. It's just a different way to slice the budget up, to give you a little more perspective on it.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I would ask that we use it as a tool and you take the time to kind of point out for us some significant changes that have occurred and why. Or maybe we budgeted for X and we're going to come in much differently, either well above it, well below it. Why? And I don't know what the cutoff is. I'm not, 10,000, 20,000, a percentage. I don't really know, but some of those big numbers where there's a discrepancy of some size, either between last year and this year, or between budget and actual, I'd be interested in just getting you to tell us, here's what's going on. So
Sure.
looking at this document.
I would be
Look
happy
at
to
this
do that.
document, you look at maintenance of plant. Now this is probably apparent, but that's 1621. We budgeted 435, we're coming in at 584. What's going on?
We're budgeting 584 because there are significant aspects, such as specific projects at the schools.
No, that's the 20, wait.
Projected.
That's projected.
That's the 21-22 projected, what we're projecting to budget for, not the actual for the 2021.
There's no actual.
But
There is
the
no
question,
21.
Oh, okay, all right, I was misunderstood.
That's what we're projecting to budget for.
it's projected.
Oh,
Okay,
But to your point, it would be nice to see those.
The actual.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it would also be awesome to, like a couple years ago, what was it? It was one of those years we got a big surprise at the end of the year with a bunch of extra money, and like we clipped the audit thing, right, at the end. And it was because of fuel oil, right? Remember, it was a warm winter, and then also the fuel oil prices, and we saved, it was a huge amount of money in fuel oil, unexpectedly, but we didn't really realize that until the end. It would have been nice to know even partway through the winter, like, hey, we're doing better on, on our fuel spending.
Just a why.
Yeah.
Why is this happening?
Yep. Yeah.
Jim-
Well, I didn't realize
find
that.
out until the auditors.
So you have a budget number here at 2021, and you're projecting for 21-22 what you think the budget will likely come in at? Is that last column?
What we're going
Yeah.
to,
Necessary
what we're
is,
going
yes.
to budget for the next year, what we're going to put in for the next year.
Yes.
can you hear
All
me?
right.
I was
Okay.
just curious, yeah, things that I was looking at and noticing was, for example, under the Business Administration 1310, where the expense jumped $100,000, which is about 25% between 18, 19, and 1920, but then dropped back down. So something happened in 1920. And I'm just curious as to what caused that jump. Something like that. I think that's what Tim was alluding to. When we see a big jump like that, what would be behind it?
And kinds of significant changes like that would be items that this would be useful to review and give the detail on, yes.
But Yeah, I do see where there might be there's always a reason, and it would just be helpful to understand what that reason is, especially if it helps us projecting forward, things to look at and things to look forward to.
Well, if you notice, the line above the 1240 line is significantly lower. So I'm wondering if some of the expenses that should have been in that line were actually in, 1310.
Right.
So
Is that
that's the
because
kind of thing
we were paying BOCES for when Mark Duty was here versus paying a salary ourselves?
Right.
So is that was where I was thinking could be, but I don't want to, make an ass out of you.
And I would be happy to go through and look at like 1819 to 1920, the last two final expense years, and detail what were the specific changes that, the large changes that happened between those 2 years. Just as 2021 budget to 21-22 projected, which is our budget, to review any significant changes there. And that's a very useful process.
Another thing, Jim, tell me if I'm wrong on this, is one thing we noticed was sometimes the budget line was a little bit lower, or things weren't budgeted for and money was taken from another place. So what we're trying to do then is say, all right, well, if that was like that before, we're going to project that money now to go into the right budget code. So that's where you'll see sometimes one budget code might be higher than it was in previous years and one might be lower, because we're actually allocating it in the correct budget line instead of just saying, well, we're going to have it, let's take it from here. We're actually saying, no, it's noted to be in this part now. So we're just trying to clean that line up of knowing exactly where our money is going and how we're budgeting for each and every expenditure.
So is it possible to have actual 2021? I know 2021 budget is a full year and actual would be, but you could do an allocation of the budget, give us something to compare to. Does that make any sense? So if you're halfway through the year, you'd show us what half of the budget would be compared to actual.
You can also look back the year before and say, at this point, year to date, in the prior fiscal year, where were we? And then compare those numbers.
That would work too.
Jim, you do have an understanding of where we currently are, correct?
I do. And it's approximately, I would say, a little over $1 million less if we project out what the actual full expenses are going to be for the end of the year. Now that assumes a couple things that may or may not happen on the revenue and expense side. So it's one of those where I'm not sure I'd want to share that since it's so uncertain. But we certainly can provide, here's where the actual expenses have been, here's what our encumbrances are, which would give us a good idea where we stand. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that's why you're asking. I'd be more curious, like if something's gonna be way off, one way or another, be better to know about it sooner than later.
That's all I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Just kind of like a health check. Hey, anything more than 5% out of bounds, like.
I'm looking at these lists right now between 2021 budget and 21-22 projected. You got about 2 lines where there's a pretty significant difference, and the rest of them are about the same. I mean, I'd just be curious, like, what's going on with that line? That's about it.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
State
looking for.
retirement's jumping year over year too.
Yes, and teachers' retirement has gone from essentially 8.86 to 9.8, so there's a significant change there. There's some change in the state retirement as well, the ERS. So that's what drives that. Basically, the salaries that are in that retirement system times the percentage that we have. So.
The maintenance of plant, am I correct in saying that, is that where we have the potential facilities director? Jim, is that maintenance of plant?
It's actually spread throughout both the 1620 and the 1621, half and half essentially. So that's part of those significant increases. On 1621, you also have the $40,000 that we set aside for specified projects at the buildings. So
it sounds like, as a board or committee, we like this picture of what we've spent, at least in years past, what we are budgeted to spend in this year, what we project the following year. It sounds like we also would like more detailed reporting on where we are, budgeted versus actual year-to-date, right?
Yeah,
Right?
but
With
what-
explanations as to
yeah,
where
to
there's
me,
discrepancies.
I think it would be helpful if we knew what was actual. And my experience in using the word projected, and this is fine, but projected to me was like, where we anticipate we're gonna be at the end of the budget year. Not projected budget for next year.
Well, we're utilizing this to create the
To
budget.
create, because we haven't done the budget yet,
Right,
so it's
yeah,
like,
right.
what do we, I understand the confusion.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like,
not
what do we
projected
think the budget's gonna be?
Maybe the word is
Yeah.
anticipated might
So
be
it
a
sounds like what we would like to see is what we budgeted, actual, and then estimated to take us through the end of the year, right? So
How
that-
close are we gonna come to budget?
Right, exactly, so estimating what's gonna fall into that category as we near the end of our fiscal year, right?
Yeah, and then that would lead us to what would be a legitimate number for next year's budget.
Right.
You know, where we saw some adjustments this year.
There's another thing to throw out there along that same topic, which Cindy and Jim, I know you guys probably remember all the conversations we had about it, which, you know, shortly before you came on board, Frank, they kind of had dropped. And I think even before any of you had, was moving to zero-based budgeting. I think he's laughing. But at the time, there were some people strongly in favor of that move, so we had a better understanding of our spending. And it, you know, it just kind of,
I do
conversation dropped.
I do like zero-based budgeting. It's extremely difficult.
It is.
And but it is something that I feel is something we could look into in the future.
This
This
year,
year-
not for right now, because we're
But
halfway-
zero-based
we're halfway
budgeting
on
is
this.
something, zero-based budgeting is what you need to do, what you'd like to do, and then the icing on the cake, and where you have, and you just build it up from absolutely nothing else.
From the ground, right? You start with, like, I have nothing for anything, and you have to justify every cost that's going to be incurred, right? And the reason why it had gotten thrown around for a couple of years is, I think, at least, and I'm not sure if it's fair to say the board didn't have a good understanding, but there were some, you know, we wanted to have a better understanding in detail of our expense structures and of where, you know, stuff in the budget was going. And, you know, and I don't remember if we had talked about moving to, say, zero-based budgeting every year from then on out, but as an exercise to sort of hit a reset switch of like, well, you know, now let's go spend, you know, 6 months going through and, you know, making sure we justify all the, instead of just rolling stuff over. Well, we spend X here, so we're going to spend Y here next year, right? So it's just more of a, for us, I think, why we talked about it was more of a thoughtful process to like look at and kind of be able to dig into some of the spend.
You were involved, weren't you, when we were having those conversations?
He was not, it was before, and it was when Mark Duty came on, that it kind of, he may have been involved in one or two conversations, and then, you know, a bunch of stuff just sort of happened, and it, you know.
A bunch of
Right.
stuff.
That was one of those ones where, you know, each year, for 2 years in a row, we said, well, I thought we were doing zero-based budgeting this year, and it was, oh, well, we didn't have time.
Jim?
And I will say, in my experience, zero-based budgeting is an exercise that you can go through that gives you some insight. However, it often loses the context of the community and the expectations of the community, and that would be my one concern. It's not an exercise I would find all that terrible. It's just that sometimes by doing it slightly differently, sometimes you lose some of the context that provides you what the budget should be. So
When you operate in an environment that's highly regulated, you have all of these mandates, you have a collective bargaining agreement. You know, zero-based budgeting to me connotes, okay, everything's on the table. Well, frankly, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's never gonna be on the table. Always gonna be required.
Yep.
And we can't take it off the table.
No.
A justification for why we're spending that much money is certainly a conversation we could be having. But acting like everything's at risk, that's not realistic.
No, that's correct. Yep.
So why don't we, do you have something?
No, I was just gonna, I really like this report. Is this something that you would, pull and would be reviewed in audit committee? Like,
So
on a regular basis or quarterly basis?
here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking as a takeaway, I get together with Jim and Frank and we come up with a new type of report, like the one we were discussing, that would show us what we budgeted, what we spent. We can do it on a monthly and then year-to-date basis.
That'd be good.
We can then do projection through the end of the year and we can have a space for comments so that we can get that explanation in a report that's sent to us. We can review that in every audit committee meeting that we have. But I would say I'll take that as a takeaway and work with Jim and Frank and whoever else you think I should work with to come up with a report that we can formalize and then have as a regular review item in our committee meetings.
The goal is we wanted to share something with you to be more transparent and get more feedback, so we can give you the information that you're looking for to help make educated decisions when we move forward.
Yeah, and I do like this. I think it's good as sort of like a top level summary, but from the discussion, it sounds like we all would like more detail. And I think we can develop a report that would give us that.
Sure.
And in those categories, the functional categories, I think is a good way to look at it.
I do too.
So thank you both for taking the time to do that, because we, like Rob said, we would find things, at the end of the year, this will really be this is a great start to expand into an ongoing monitoring tool. So thank you, Frank, and thank you, Jen. Appreciate it.
It would be nice just so that we could see something like what you're suggesting, is just something nice and neat. And if we had something quarterly, which we could look at, that had simplicity to it, okay? For all of us, I think you could come up with something that we could all understand, and it doesn't have to be something that scares the living hell out of everybody.
I think we could do that. All right. Okay, great. All right, anyone have anything else? Otherwise, I think we're adjourned. Jim, Francine, Robin, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
All right.
Bye.
Be off.
And we're live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 8th regular Board of Education meeting for Voorheesville. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, roll call of trustees. All board members are present. Mrs. Gilker is joining us virtually. For the good of the order, board discussion, do any board members have any comments or?
I do.
Oh,
I
please.
got a couple of things. So, first of all, I just wanted to mention a couple words about the school counseling program. I'm a member of the advisory committee. We had a meeting earlier this afternoon. One of the things we talked about is that March is a really long month. The winter blues are real. Fortunately, the end is in sight, I hope. But despite being pretty thin in terms of resources, the school counselors have been doing some really great work, and they have a lot planned for our students and staff to help with their social and emotional health. Coming up in March, they have a college day, I believe is this Friday, which I know is always a lot of fun for the kids, and I think for the teachers too. Trivia events are coming up. They've been also working on a mentor and a mentee program and looking at expanding that even into the elementary school, which I think is a great idea. And another thing that's happening is lunch groups for remote students, which I think is great, trying to keep our remote students engaged with the school community. So they are doing a lot of great work, and like I said, resources-wise, they are spread very thin. And I think if there's anything we can do at some point to help prop them up, that would be a good use of our resources. Second thing I wanted to say, just because it's been in the news a lot. You know, I read an article about New York City, you know, bringing back seniors this week or next week and reopening their schools to high schoolers. And it got me thinking about how fortunate we are. And I don't want us to, you know, take for granted all the good work that's happening here and that our schools have been open since September. And, you know, as Frank mentioned the other day, we haven't had any spread of COVID in the schools. You know, it just goes to show what a great job we're doing, not just as a school, but as a community, to, you know, follow the protocols, to keep our schools safe. And the fact that we've been able to have our schools open and students attending school in person, I think is just a remarkable achievement. So thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Couldn't agree more. Any other comments? Okay, thank you. Opportunity for the public to be heard. There were no requests or emails for comments from the public. And regarding our next meeting, which isn't until April 12th, we will reevaluate the status of the county at that time to see if when we pursue back with inviting the community in or staying in this kind of format. So I think that's going to be a month-by-month evaluation for quite some time now.
I have a quick question with regards to schedule meeting in terms of the budget, right? So things are a little bit different this year, obviously. Usually we've had some community forums and stuff like that around. Are we doing, I guess, what are we doing around that and how?
What would the board like?
Some ideas. Yeah. I mean, like, I remember last year we were all packed into it, and it was not a board meeting, right? Because it's, you know, we were all sitting in the back of the library together. But there was, you know, like the budget forum and that kind of thing it's the budget roadshow to get it out to, you know, the community, help foster better understanding for what's going on. Usually I think we usually have 2 to 3 extra meetings that are not board meetings, you know, on the schedule.
They're not board meetings.
They're not. Well, one of them, we have like maybe budget hearings that roll into board meetings, and then, you know, again, usually 1 or 2 that are those community focused, you know, sort of you explaining the budget. But yeah, just kind of wondering what we're doing this year since we can't really pack everybody into a library.
So last year we ran into the same issue because I was scheduled to go to the senior living centers and go to all these other places, and all of a sudden they got shut right down. So, you know, we did have a private conversation, brief conversation, Jim and I, about possibility of doing just like a budget forum where we offer it to the community, like an open forum, you know, like on WebEx where people can then use a Q&A for us to do that. We're working out that detail at this moment. I'm still trying to figure out, because I'm not, as you know, the most technical human being in the world. You know, again, doing the budget roadshow, as you call it, like going to Kiwanis Club, having those conversations, that's something that I'm also looking into. I wasn't sure what you meant by that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. No, I was just, when Cindy said our next
things.
meeting is April, just clicking in my head, like, yeah, usually we have a few more things popping up and just kind of, hey, how are we?
But unfortunately, this year it's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah,
You
totally.
can't get out as much as you typically would be able to go out and be able to have, you know, community forums and town hall kind of sessions.
Yeah, and I think we did utilize like the enterprise last year and the seniors, you know, made sure we mailed extra copies to the senior center who distributed, you know, to people that wouldn't normally get that or may not be watching.
I mean, maybe even something that's just a sort of broadcast presentation on YouTube that's easily shareable and can
that's a great idea.
Throw all over Facebook or all over so that it's, you know, consumable, short, concise, but easy to kind of get.
I can work with our communications team.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
No,
it's a great idea.
Because all of a sudden I was like, April 12th, oh my gosh.
I'm looking at a budget PowerPoint that we'll be talking about in a few minutes. It comes pretty close to what you're talking about. I think it's got the dates in here and it plus a lot.
That was the other, I got that up right there too.
Yeah,
the thing that made me
pretty well done, I would say. That's a pretty good start.
Yeah.
Good colors too.
Yeah, but I think if we do a little voiceover, you know, maybe add some theme songs to it, but and we put it in a nice YouTube clip, though, you know, send it out there. I think it's just a different way to do the same thing we're doing, but get it out there maybe even more.
I do have a question about dates. You have an audit committee meeting on April 5th, but a board meeting on April 12th.
No, the board, April 5th, when's,
Sounds like an oopsie.
Well, it says at the bottom of the agenda we just got, says April 5th.
no, because April 12th is our next board meeting, I believe, because
I might be-
you're on break the first week of April, right? School's on break for Easter, first week of April, that's why our meeting is the 12th?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, I think the April 5th, like Rob said, is an oopsie.
Yeah, it's April 12th, sorry.
Yeah, it is
12,
April 12th.
okay, gotcha.
Because,
Now-
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
yeah, April
Maybe this
12th.
is a function of email or something, but automatically in my calendar, I see budget forum and Board of Ed meetings starting at 6.
On the 12th,
I'm not sure why.
on the 12th, Ron?
Yeah, it could just be my laptop trying to be too smart.
Mine does the same thing.
Oh, it does?
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Well, maybe we can get some dates.
6 o'clock for the budget forum.
I mean, that's, again,
7 o'clock
that's what my
meeting.
calendar's telling me, I don't see anything to back that
Well,
up.
we'll let, you want to work on what you're doing first. and
Yeah,
then
Jess
we
is,
can-
well, Jess has the calendar, so I'm gonna talk to her tomorrow so she
We'll
can
see
verify.
what
'cause
So
she
you'd
put
have
it
an
in.
audit committee meeting before then?
I have that
At
it's on.
7:45, I think.
Yeah, I don't think.
6:45.
6:45?
Yep, because we only need to do. And I
I
think
think
it,
the budget form is part of the budget.
So it
form.
does say on our website, it says budget forum and regular meeting, adopt budget, 6 PM, and then the regular meeting immediately following.
Yeah.
And then-
Yeah, it's a budget form.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we
So-
might need to move, maybe we start 15 minutes earlier, the audit committee, we just do a short meeting to review the charter.
yeah, and we'll put it
You can work
together
it
and then just
You'll work
have
it
it one continuous meeting like last time, Frank.
Yeah, no, work out perfect.
Because,
We'll do 5:45, then budget forum at 6, and then
and
Board
move
meeting's
it
on.
right into the board meeting, whether it's early or late. I think that works good, okay? And I do want to say
What
that.
month is that gonna be?
April.
April
April
12th.
12th.
April 12th.
April 12th,
Okay.
yeah. And, but I think that it's been extremely valuable that these monthly updates are giving us on the budget, so it's not, it hasn't waited till now. I mean, we are keeping up on everything and everything, so thank you.
But if there is any ideas that anyone has to be able to reach out to the greater community, because not everybody goes online and watches the videos and, does those things. So if there is a way that we can reach out better, I'd be more than happy to do it. And, Jim and I would be more than happy to take a road show and go to different places and do things. It's very difficult to try to get the word out and make sure people have a better understanding of it.
What are we allowed to do by law to promote voting yes on budget is?
It's voting. You can't vote.
Very
yes.
little.
No,
Yeah, no,
No, I mean, in terms of advertising, right, like, can you even stick something up on the Hannaford, like, freeboard there that says, vote yes on the school?
Not paid
You
for
can't say
by the
vote
district,
yes.
not paid for by the district.
we can give the best information that's out there and encourage people to vote.
Can't vote, can't say vote yes.
Can't say vote yes.
People have
Yes,
their
you
own
can say
choice.
vote.
You can say vote.
You can say vote and make sure people go out and
Yeah.
vote. And I think the idea is be as transparent as you can, share as much information as you can, and share the why of what you're doing, what you're asking for. That's I think the best you can do to be able to work through a budget.
As it stands right now, it's still going to be an election on the third Tuesday in May,
It's,
a budget vote, and a new board member election.
It has not changed. So
Okay.
it's exactly.
In-person election.
In person, we even have voting machines now.
Yeah, I saw
which
that.
is much better than what we thought it was gonna be, yep. Albany County came back and said that we had voting machines. So that was a win, and a breath of fresh air.
So
So right now, as it stands, there's gotta be protocols that we haven't seen yet, but it is a typical normal budget.
So if that's the case, then I think that some of the explanation that was needed last year, when it was all different, may not be as critical. Not that we want to tell people what's going on, and
no, because again, every year we do try to make sure that we get out and tell people about what's in the budget so that they vote for it, whether it's in
Right,
person
sure.
or not. And that's sort of what I was talking about.
but it is hopefully just kind of a normal year.
It's close to normal.
Kind of.
It's
What's normal, right?
It's normal. Well, with that being said, up
Yeah,
next is our budget presentation.
Cindy,
Yes.
just
Okay.
one quick thing. Hi, sorry I can't be there. I just wanted to say a shout out to the science fair in the elementary school, and I bought my tickets, my electronic tickets to the Drowsy Chaperone, and the drama club is doing an online show. I'm pretty excited to see that.
Yeah.
at the end of the month. So there are a bunch of extracurricular activities that students are involved in, and there's like Go Beyond the elementary school and other things. So it's great to see those things happening.
Yes. And wait till the windows can be on. Wait till it's spring. Yay. A lot of
It's
outdoor
coming.
stuff.
It's gonna be
It's
60.
coming. Been a long winter. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, so budget presentation, Jim and Frank.
All right, Jim, that's all your magical technology wizardry.
Okay, so the format of the presentation is exactly the same as last month, so I may skip over things. If there's anything you want to go back to, please let me know. So reviewing the budget from the revenue side, we have assumed in this version that we are going to the tax cap. We have also assumed that we are going to put in 300,000 of allocated fund balance. So those are the two significant changes. And you'll see that that goes from the tax levy from a little over 70% to 72.5% of the budget. And the allocated fund balance is 1.1%. Now, with that information in there, the gap reduces slightly from the projected gap before to $426,000, or 1.6% of our current budget. Governor's executive budget, nothing has changed there, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Tax cap, we know that it's down from the maximum 2% CPI, and that would give us a little more wiggle room if that were in place.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Yep.
We have an indication that there's going to be federal education money. Do you have any numbers that have been provided to you?
Nothing at all yet, because it hasn't officially passed yet, so they aren't giving us any projections.
Okay, no projections. All right, thank you.
But I want to say, even what we get regarding that, it's a one and done.
It's one and done.
So, I mean, always the fear is if you utilize that and you increase and you don't take into account that the year after or the year after, you're not going to have that money, you're creating a bigger gap and a bigger hole in the future because that money's gone.
Well, I get that.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying in
But
general.
I'm looking at this $426,000 and I'm just wondering what
plans.
What might be the number we get from the feds
that would help us.
That would maybe fill that entire gap. We don't know. That's what you're telling me. Okay.
And with the state not being complete yet.
The state budget could actually fill that gap.
So.
Well, it could, unless they supplant.
Well, then we're in a bigger issue then, aren't we?
Okay, so the tax cap calculation is the same as it was before, with 0 on the capital levy exclusion for the upcoming year. Total tax levy projected cap of $19,266,635, or a 2.72% increase on current year tax levy.
Now, we do have one of the highest growth rates within the capital region again. So we're spreading that out. So, even though we're seeing those increases, it's still spread them out, a larger amount of people and a larger growth. So that does help keep things a little bit lower. Again, except for the equalization rate that we do not have control over. I always want to state that in the end is we don't have the ability to, control that equalization rate. So even if it's a lower increase here, it could jump other ways when those equalization rates go into effect.
The takeaway being a 2.72% increase does not mean a 2.72% increase in your taxes.
That's correct.
Right.
Right. It could be less than 2.72 because of our growth rate.
Yep.
And it also could be more if your home was revaluated. So
reassessed, or if they get whatever that comes in at.
Yeah.
Okay. School tax relief, we talked about that. I'm hopeful that with the new money coming from the federal government that some of that impact will be blunted, but that remains to be seen as part of the state budget process. We do know that we can make adjustments that if people are willing to go to the tax credit rather than the exemption on the actual tax bill, that would limit the impact. Same information from before about what happens in the governor's budget. So other revenues, the only change here is the allocated fund balance being added at the current $300,000 level that we have in the current year, that we are projecting that we aren't likely to use. So it'll just remain the same. Federal revenue, the COVID relief aid from December is this $1.1 million number that the governor has provided in his budget for an offset.
Can I ask a question? Going back, you just used the phrase aren't likely to use. What's that mean?
Correct. That means that under the current projections, our revenues are going to be higher than our expenses, which means we would not have to delve into the allocated fund balance.
We'll have it in there, but we might not have to use it.
Correct.
It'll be rollover, right?
But we'll roll it over for next year's budget.
Rollover.
So every year, the district typically does $300,000 towards next year. So as long as we didn't spend it this year, and we've been frugal and be able to keep that money, we can now put it towards the 21-22 budget.
Got it.
But that means the following year, you really want to have that $300,000 to keep putting back in. Because if you spend that $300,000, you don't have it to put into that next year, and then you create a gap.
Have we been doing the 300,000 for a while?
Yeah, I believe it's been religious here for a very long time.
Long time.
It's worked well.
Yep,
It's worked well.
it's worked well.
Good.
So the draft expense budget, there haven't been many changes, but I will note them as we go through. So special education contract transportation was one item that had been under an emergency contract prior year and coming into the current year. It's now been formalized under the contract, and we have included the amount that we've projected to be for next year. No changes to the staffing projections under the budget projection. Employee benefits, the only change is the teacher's retirement system went to an official statement of 9.8% from the max of 10 that they had previously put out there. Here's one change. Because of some, I don't know if I'd call it unexpected monies, but some monies that are going to be coming in the current year that we are planning to use to buy down some of the bond anticipation note, we have removed that payment that was projected for the upcoming year, the $200,000. We have removed that from the upcoming year. So the summary of the draft budget, projected expenses of 26,561, projected revenues of 26,134 with everything included, the tax cap, and the allocated fund balance. Again, the projection of the gap, 426,000. Gap will be addressed with any new state or federal aid. I did not include that in there. Potential use of reserves and potential reductions of the increases, the items we've added to the rollover budget to address that gap. State budget timeline is the same as it has been. April 1 is the deadline for an on-time state budget. We are 23 days away, 24 days away. Be interesting to see. And then going forward, we actually have already filed the tax levy limit with the comptroller's office, so we're good there. And then here are the deadlines for filing petitions and adopting the budget. That's
it. The projected gap, again, what was it last year at this time? Do you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
I generally ask this every year. I never
Last
remember
year,
what it is,
I gotta be honest with you,
I should probably just write it down right now.
I feel like we were right around, last year I believe we were right around the same.
It was similar
ballpark
right?
area.
Yeah.
This is a pretty common area for us to be in, most schools. And honestly, a $426,000 gap at this point in time is pretty good in comparison to where it could be. I mean, I know it sounds crazy and people listening is going, what do you mean? But, you know, a lot of schools, you're seeing 1.1, 1.7, 2.5. I mean, it's a much bigger issue to be able to get to. When you're at the 400,000, offsetting with federal reserves, offsetting with possible state funding. And then also you have to remember, this 426 is including, you know, a facilities director, another special education teacher for high school. It's adding on those specific items that we would be able to utilize to help move our infrastructure closer and further on. So those are the things that we, you know, that are in there, that was on that one draft summary that he went through quickly, that we can look and say, all right, if we need to, what can we take away from this? So we have that kind of wish list here of the very specific things that we need and we'd like to see going forward. But if we have to, we would cut that first before cutting any program or any people. So you're not at risk of losing any of those items.
I have a budget question. I don't know if it's for you or for Jim, but when we have the list of the staff that we might add to the rollover budget.
Can you go back to that, Jim?
Is this from
Yep.
the budget? I'm getting a little confused. Now, originally, for this year, we had planned to add a counselor, but then COVID hit and we rejuggled. So is this comparing to what we rejuggled, or is this comparing back to what we were gonna do before COVID hit?
So it's reviewing, so that counselor, that part-time counselor, that's in, we're hiring that.
So that isn't on this list?
It's not on there because we already budgeted
In the
that.
budget last
So that was
year?
the sell last year, remember?
Yeah.
We're having it, we're doing it, and then unfortunately this year just was, we can't because of COVID and all the other issues. So that's in. I mean, our goal is to hire a part-time social worker / counselor for the elementary school really to hit that need. And now it's absolutely there. So that's not part of the budget. We're having that in. We've already game planned. That's not on the table for us to even care about.
Right.
We're hiring that. That's
Yeah,
our
I'm just
goal.
getting a little
Yep.
confused what we were.
No, that makes,
where we're
and that was
starting.
one thing Jim and I talked about actually in the very beginning, like, all right, this is what we said we were gonna go in last year. It just wasn't done. Let's make sure we still have that in and budget for that accordingly. So our plan is to still make sure that we have that, especially now with the need even more than ever. But no, that's absolutely, that was something that we had to clarify ourselves when we first started this process.
Great, thank you.
Cool.
Any other questions? Okay, once again, thanks Jim, thanks Frank for these monthly updates. Very good.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, on
Welcome.
to superintendent's report,
All
Mr.
right.
McPhee.
So I'm gonna talk about a few things. One, I think the first thing I have to say is, the month of February was just 1,000 times better than what it could have been, thanks to the VCSF. What they did for our school community, what they did for, and when I say school community, I mean Voorheesville in general, and what they did for our staff and our students. It made our days, and it was just fantastic. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that and thank Trish, because I know you're a part of that, and everyone else who was a part of the VCSF for what they did, not only for us as a school, but for our community. It was fantastic. And I know a lot of communities were also jealous, by the way, because I'm like, you wouldn't believe what's happening in Voorheesville.
And it really energized the community. Like, we put the idea out there as a foundation and did a lot of the work, but so much happened,
Yeah.
just
It was amazing.
grassroots from the community once they saw it. So,
Yeah, and to think that the power of giving, what it can do
Yeah.
on a normal year, and then during COVID, what it did, it really shows you what a community can do when they put their heads together. So thank you for
Yeah.
helping that. Along with what, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag, and Mrs. Schmitz would probably be mad at me for doing this. Maura Manning and Stephen Giordano, Albany County Mental Health, are working with the school district, and on March 31st, they're going to be doing a program here, virtual of course, with Dr. Daly and our community, and it's a multifaceted event that's going to discuss mental health, LGBTQ questioning, drug and abuse, sexual abuse. So all these different things that are out there for community members, we're really going to be able to have one night of a whole bunch of different avenues for people to really explore and understand. So thank you to Albany County Mental Health Department. It's huge. They really are. I mean, we met with them. They're the ones leading this charge. They've been great to us and really to our community to be able to put this on. We're excited that we can offer this.
Is it virtual?
It's going to be virtual. They're working through the IT component of that as well for us. So we're going to have a program coming out soon. But this is the only time that I'm going to be here to be able to meet with you to discuss this. I just wanted to share that this is happening. It will be coming out within the next week. We'll have a press release and be able to get that information. But it's a great program that we're going to be able to give people and hopefully have follow-up from there that we can be able to make sure that we're giving people the services and help that they need. So and that will be for our full community. I want to quickly talk about the recent letter I sent out regarding 3 through 8 in Regents testing. There is still, as I said in the letter, it's not about the test in itself. An understanding of a student is a bunch of different components that are in there. This year, though, it's a diagnostic. It's not tied to anything, and we still really aren't sure what it looks like. They haven't put out the guidance. They said flexibility, but they haven't told us what that flexibility is going to be in New York. So, this is something that we're looking towards and trying to understand in a better light. Again, our 3rd and 4th graders have never taken this test. Usually it's our 3rd graders that have never taken something. This year it's our 3rd and 4th graders. I will tell you, I have a 3rd grader, and I said, "You're going to take a test?" She goes, "Great." She's just excited because it was the idea of, I said to her, it's not about what you don't know, it's about what you do know and how we can help you get better. And, after I explained to my 3rd grader that's what she was taking, it was kind of like a light went off. She goes, "Oh, I totally get it, Dad." I don't always get that from my children. But, we are doing that, and it is coming up. The expectation is hopefully the state within the next week or two will give us some clarity of what these exams are really going to look like and what the flexibility is going to be. The Regents exams right now, we won't know until the end of March, and really after it goes to the Board of Regents of what's going to happen with those. There is a lot of conversations out there of what that's going to look like. The U.S. Department of Education states that we have to have accountability and an understanding of our students for math and sciences and ELA. That means the social studies components. People are like, "Well, you've got to give a social studies Regents," and then other people are like, "No, you don't have to." So there's a lot of conversations out there right now that we don't have control over. So it's kind of a waiting game to see really what happens. Right now, it's 4 exams. They wouldn't have any weight against a student's grade level or their ability to get credit. That's gone, but they still want to be able to take those to have an understanding. That could change.
Regents exams.
Regents exams, correct. That could change. It has to go through the Board of Regents. Everybody has to have those conversations. And we've all been doing this long enough to know that nothing's set in stone until it's been voted on and it's clear. So we're really not sure what this is going to look like. What that means for us, though, is we don't know what the end of the year will look like either, right? Because they could come out and say, "All right, we only have 4 Regences. We're only going to have 2 days. And then instead of giving the state exams in April, we're going to give them in June." Right? I mean, there's a whole bunch, and I'm speculating. Please don't quote me on that, anyone or anyone else. I'm just saying, we don't know what's going to happen because it's too uncertain. So after it gets clear of how many exams they're going to give in June, because that's going to be an issue, right? After they know that, after we know what the flexibility looks like 3 through 8, then I think we'll have a better picture of where we stand with these things. But at this moment, we just know that they're not doing the waiver for 3 through 8 exams. 3 through 8 exams are going to be given, and Regents exams are up for a discussion with the Board of Regents. Any questions on that?
I do.
Yes, Trish.
I've been trying to follow the state ed and the Board of Regents.
Yep.
So the reasoning of why they wanted a waiver and why they're so upset we didn't get it, can you explain why they didn't think assessment should happen this year?
I think there's a bunch of different viewpoints on that. So, I mean, some people wanted to not do the assessment because they were worried about any gap in learning and being able to have students go through what they learned. And then the other aspect was people did want to have that. And there was a push to have it because there was a diagnostic that wanted to be given.
Not
So-
from the state, though.
No.
The state is mad
Frank?
that the feds are still requiring it, no?
Right.
Frank?
Yeah, but I have to be honest with you this. I don't put myself in the middle of what the state and what the feds would want. I look at it in the viewpoint of, I know that, if we're gonna give an exam and it's a diagnostic tool, we're gonna use that to the best of our abilities. And, that's big P, so big politics in my world, and then we're little p. And, I kind of keep in this bubble when it comes to some of those things and understand that I don't have a control factor of how those testing and what is, who's lobbying who to be able to get what. That's not a world that I can live in at the moment. We live in the little p kind of world.
But if we understand that the state is against them for whatever reason, and we know we still have to give them whether we want to or not, isn't there a way we can support families in understanding why the state doesn't feel the state assessments are smart this year?
Well, I think the state is the one that's going to tell us that we have to give those assessments, and I think they wanted the flexibility aspect and not to have it be diagnosed and not to have it count towards anything. So there was a compromise in with that regard. I don't think the state has come out, because I haven't seen something directly from the state saying, I don't want, I saw what the chancellor stated, but I haven't seen something saying don't give the exam, or we're not happy about it.
Well, the paper request outlines.
Yeah,
That they requested.
Exactly.
it was just what they requested.
Why they didn't feel the assessments
Yeah.
were good for this year.
Yeah, but I believe at this point, they are gonna give the assessment. They were told that they have to, but the flexibility and aspect of it is that, I haven't seen any guidance from New York State after that point. So I don't know, has anyone else seen any guidance on that?
I did see something that said, I think it was from the United States Department of Education, that said that students that are fully remote would not be requested or required to come in just to take the exam. And I also remember reading something about the stress level of students, and you mentioned that administrators would be addressing that, but will they include the opportunity for students who are extremely stressed? I mean, it's so awesome that your daughter looks at it and thinks that this is a fun task, but
Yeah, well, again, we're gonna give an exam for a diagnostic tool. We're gonna work with our students to make sure that they have the ability to do the exam and feel comfortable and confident when they come into school and make sure they're not stressed. And, that's the goal that we're gonna do. We're gonna create a safe environment for our students to be able to do this. If the state says that they don't have to come in and we can give them remote, then we'll be able to do that guidance and give it remote. We're gonna follow the guidance that New York State provides to us to be able to give to our students.
I think you're right on, Frank. I honestly think this is a year, more than any year, where some diagnostic, and just diagnostic, not for accountability purposes, not for determining whether or not you're made the grade, but something, where are these kids now? Because this has been such a crazy year for them.
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised, frankly, that what your daughter said. I bet there's gonna be other kids out there who say, I'd love to have something like that right now.
And there will be kids who are stressed, and there are gonna be people
Absolutely.
who get test anxiety.
But if you could message this in a way to say, relax. This is not a high stakes, make it or break it situation. We just wanna get a sense of, where are you?
Let me put this in the best kind of clarity that I can. Everybody's talking about learning gap, right? Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we say there's gonna be a learning gap because of the way that COVID is, then we automatically know that there is one. But at this point, we have no measure to say, was there truly a learning gap? How about we look and see, give us a tool that we can look at and say, was there any deficits that our students is? What were the strengths from this year? Because I'll tell you, when we see it, and what we've seen from our students' grades now and their assessments that they're seeing, we're seeing positives. We're seeing strengths in some of the key components. This tool is going to be something that will be able to help our educators be able to move forward. And again, it's not going to be one of those things where people are going to be like, well, you have to sit in a class for 2 hours and do it. It's not like that. It's going to be a very kind of, I believe it's going to be segmented, shorter.
You don't know that.
I'm hoping.
Okay.
It's going to be, but we're waiting on this to go. I think it's too unclear right now for people to say, this is what it's going to be, or here's the stress levels, or here's the specifics, because we don't know. I think we have to wait and see what comes out and what guidance is given.
And we'll follow the state guidance, and if children, regardless of building, need support, the support will be there, correct?
Yep.
Can't hear you, Rachel. Now we can. You're good?
what?
Rachel?
Yeah, I'm just slightly challenged because I don't know. I think it's a very challenging situation, and it feels a lot like, Frank, what you've been going through for the whole year, where you're given one set of directions and then 15 minutes later it totally changes, and it just feels like the same thing is happening again. So.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think there's every opportunity. Please excuse, I know this is your former employer, but there's every opportunity for the state education department to screw this thing up. And I worry about that, honestly, I really do. That they wanted to get the waiver, they didn't get what they wanted, and how will that impact what they deliver on? I don't know. Is it predictable? I don't think so. We're gonna get what we're gonna get, and we're gonna have to work with what tools they give us. But I think your attitude's right. We're gonna do this in a very, I would hope this would be viewed as something that is simply a diagnostic exercise to help children, their families, teachers, get a better sense of where we're at, a kind of a, checking the oil.
Yep.
And it's not expected to be anything other than that.
And New York State Education Department has our children in the forefront of their mind as they're developing these programs in the waiver. And I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to be able to come through with something that is going to meet the needs of our state and of our students. I just, I have faith that this is going to be a positive environment and is going to do what it needs to do to be able to move us forward.
And so I think the other thing, though, it's good for us to have this conversation because I'd like to understand, and I think people out there want to understand it. But as a Board of Education, I mean, we have to follow the law, and we don't really have the ability to have a say in what we do here one way or another, right?
Well, we
I
do
mean,
have the ability to help the community know.
oh, sure, be supportive of the students, but it's not like we have the ability to say, well, we're not going to test, or we're going to make a decision to do something one way or another. We can make sure that we put everything in place to be supportive of the students but in terms of having that conversation about whether or not we should be doing this or not, like we don't really have a role.
That's not our.
Right, it's not our place to say, for good or for bad, right? We have to follow state law, we have to follow federal law, whatever they tell us we have to do, whether we want to or not. And unfortunately, we have to do that.
Yeah.
But given whatever is put out in front of us, and making sure that we have give our students and our teachers and everybody the right tools, to be able to have it have as little impact as possible.
I have one more thing, sorry. So the last thing I just want to talk about is we have been looking at the ability to say, couldn't we possibly bring students back more? Like, can we change our high school rotation? And, we are looking into it. I know people have asked me this question over and over again, and some people don't want to bring kids back more and more. Some families are like, no, please don't. And some families, yes, please do. So we're looking at this to really try to figure out, is this a possible thing that we can do? There's a lot of issues that go into it, a lot of levels. Transportation, for one, is a major component, still with the 6 feet aspect of it. As we were talking to our staff, and the high school staff specifically, there are some major issues when it comes to science curriculum and the way that labs are being done and the way that we're doing them, that if you were to change that rotation, it actually changes the ability of that teacher to deliver the curriculum in a more positive way. It's more positive remotely right now because of the structures that they have put into it, because you're changing the rotation. So there's a lot of different ways that they're giving things that we didn't see. So we're trying to really understand the curriculum implications, positives and negatives that go along with it. And the other component right now is, again, we are having, there is a positive rate of COVID within our school community. It's not here in our school. It's, again, when I say school community, I mean the greater outside in quarantines. And, we still have to make every decision to be safe. So it's not off the table of us changing the rotation from 3 days to 2 days every other day, but there's a lot that has to go into that. I don't foresee that happening within the next month and by any way, shape, or form. But we are still going to continue to look at that to see if it's a possibility for us. A lot of things have to come out of that, but I just wanted to share that it is something that we're exploring. But there's too many logistical areas right now that we don't have a good firm grasp of, that we can say, yeah, we can, or no, we can't.
And
That's
if someday there was to be a change, it would be towards like an every other day, not like a 2 out of 3.
No, it would be an every other day.
Every other day is probably not the max we can handle.
But then you have to look at a rotation. We do an AD rotation, so you can't do an AD rotation because then you wouldn't be able to have the kids. So like I said, this is a very complicated issue. It's not as easy as people think it would be.
I don't want to have to be the one to figure that out.
Yeah, and again, and I think it's important for people to understand it's not as easy as people think it is, because our teachers have done a great job finding their rotation and delivering the curriculum in the current way, and all of a sudden you're trying to tell somebody, hold on, you have to change that plan and do it up. There's specific things that they understand their curriculum better than I would, and they're in that, and so we have to rely on people to be able to make sure that they understand what the implications are and we can plan through.
I've read of some districts that are talked about going from 6 feet to 3 feet. Are they allowed to do that?
So Onondaga County did it, and that was the Department of Health changed that there.
So at the county level?
The county level did it, but it's not set in stone yet. They haven't actually implemented it within their districts yet.
There's a lot that goes into that.
It's also using barriers though, so it's not,
right.
it's not 6 feet to 3 feet and you just squish them together, it's
Yeah.
6 feet. And in the state guidance, it
Yeah.
says 6 feet or a barrier,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
So,
okay.
so there's plexiglass barriers between it, it doesn't,
I thought they proved that it's not fomites, it's aerosols. That seems silly.
no, a plexiglass barrier stopping you from coughing or sneezing or aerosols
Yeah.
on, oh, you're
And
talking
they go
about.
all the way to the ceiling.
Gas moves up.
Yeah. That seems
Yeah.
so silly.
Right.
But I think that's,
But
look,
we don't worry about that.
that's not our
Right,
county.
I was like, that's not our county, please.
But again, CDC recommendations, actually, American Pediatric Association is 3 feet. So, I think you're gonna see a lot of conversations over the next, 6 months to a year of conversations like that across the state, across the nation, of what schools are going to do. Again, I think it's just gonna be a good watching game and see where things play out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, next year could be a totally
Totally different.
different ballgame, right?
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah, as people get vaccinated.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I got, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on, approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve last month's minutes, please?
Approve.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Aye.
Okay, and then if we can group 5.1. Aye. She's lagging a
A
little.
little lag.
Yeah. Okay, so let's group 5.1 to 5.6. That would be treasurer's report, personnel items, which consists of basically coaches to fill the coaches that Willie Sanchez, the resignation, so 5.3 CSE, 5.4 substitute teacher appointments, 5.5 pandemic.
The continuity of operation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah,
We may want to separate.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can separate that one.
Let's do that.
Okay, and then 5.6.
Can I ask you about 5.6? Just a quick question.
Okay, wait, how about this, before we do that, why don't we just do up to 5.4?
All right.
5.1 to 5.4 substitute teacher, and then we can have separate comments for the other one. Can I have a motion to move those items, please?
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, Frank, would you like to give an update on the approval?
Yeah, so I sent out a thing in my news and notes that I apologize didn't get to you the day that I wanted it to. But this is something that the governor stated that the school districts have to do back in December, then it was pushed back until April. And basically what it is the plan that we already have, that we've already been doing, and that we did. And it's basically what happens if you were to close, how do you still continue to operate within your school system? So the plan that is out here is exactly how we clean, exactly how we would do it, who our staffing would be. That is the plan that we've been working on with our safety team, our unions have looked at this, and it's really just our current practices of what it is for the district, but the governor wanted us to solidify that down and codify it.
Put it in writing,
Yep,
right?
and that's what we've
Put it in
done.
writing.
And we didn't have like a DR sort of business continuity plan prior to this for like regular disasters, right? As part of our safety stuff.
We didn't have like this, like what would happen if the school closed or anything. Like we had a safety plan of how do you close or how do you do those things, but how do you give instruction during a pandemic? We had nothing like that. So this is really that plan and the addendum to that. Last year, like all schools, we developed it on the fly. And so now it was something now that we have. So if anything ever happens like this again, we at least have it codified.
And maybe when all this is over, we can look at rolling something more generic, right? Out of,
Yep, exactly.
Good idea.
Next pandemic.
Hey, can I have a motion to move 5.5, please? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So Rachel. Okay, thank you, Rachel. Okay, 5.6, this is non-resident student admission request. Mr. Kremer, you had a
I've
question?
got a quick question. I think you've answered this for me before. Do these people pay tuition?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Then can I have a motion to move 5.6, please?
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. She really is on the way.
Okay, 5.7, this is approval of the special Board of Education meeting. We need a quorum if possible. It shouldn't take long at all. This is for the BOCES board member meeting. It's at 7, when is it? Let's see.
7:15 a.m.
Yeah, 7:15 a.m. And do we have 4 people who would be available? It's virtual, I'm assuming, obviously. Are 4 people available to attend for about
21st.
What day?
would be virtual? It's April 21st
21st, a Wednesday.
at 7:15 a.m. And it usually lasts like, I don't think it's that long.
Like a minute?
meeting. A minute maybe, 5 minutes.
I can be there.
Okay, Rachel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and I think I can, I just don't want to commit, so. If I can't, I'll reach out to somebody who can, okay? Otherwise, we'll plan on myself, Rob, RG, and Rachel, 7:15, okay?
And there will be something coming out, like a link for that, right? So-
Yeah, they'll send, Jess will send that, yeah, right. Okay, thank you, everyone. Okay, old business, audit committee, we met this evening. RG, would you like to give a brief update, please?
Sure. So we covered the school lunch fund, which continues to run at a deficit, which is not unexpected this year. Lunch participation is down, but breakfast participation is up by about 150%, which we think is attributable to students taking sort of to-go bags or grab-and-go bags when they're entering the high school complex, which we think is a good thing. We're feeding students, and they appear to be enjoying the breakfast, so that's a good thing. We went over the claims auditor reports. There were only 2 exceptions there. There's a couple of items that Jim Suther's going to look into, including exceptions that are warranty related, where someone believes the item is covered under the warranty, but it isn't. And then also looking into shipping charges, so that we don't unnecessarily get charged shipping, if that can be avoided. We had a discussion about the duties of the claims auditor position, and Jim is going to do some work to come up with a duties description for the claims auditor and establish some duties that are clear, so that we have expectations on what falls into the claims auditor function versus some other staff. And we're going to look at our procedure for access to personnel folders as well. We reviewed the audit committee charter again. That will be finalized hopefully at our next audit committee meeting, which will be a brief meeting on the 12th of April. And we also reviewed a functions level summary in terms of the amounts that are budgeted, the amounts that are actual for prior years, and what we project for next year. And we all like the format of that report, but we're going to work on a more detailed report that will show us what we've budgeted versus what we spent, what we estimate to spend throughout the remainder of the fiscal year, and either look at a quarterly or monthly reporting period and then capture year to date. So I think we can work on pulling that together, and it'll provide us with a nice summary of where we are. And that's it. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you, RG. Curriculum committee did not meet this month. Their next meeting is March 23rd, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Facilities, Rob?
All right, we had another, this wasn't a marathon one, but it was pretty long. Frank, I'm probably gonna ask you for some, this is one of those things, it's been a month since we met, there's all these things that like, we're supposed to happen by February 25th, so I'll probably be asking. Anyway, radon, we ordered more radon test kits. We had, I guess, an old vent fan by the middle school gym pool area wasn't working. It's been fixed, so we're anticipating even better radon results next go around. Better is good, generally. We had ordered Merv 11s that were supposed to be arriving this February 25th, so they're here.
There,
Awesome.
they're getting in, yes. Our guys are in the works of doing that.
Have they been installed yet?
They're in the process.
They're in the process.
Yep.
Awesome. We had a, this is one of those words that I didn't want to hear like mid-pandemic, but we had a sinkhole I guess, at the elementary school. It is not as scary as it sounded, with some, some drainage issues with the drainage system over by the maintenance sheds.
We got another one.
Huh? Oh, we have another one? This one's not scary either, right?
There's an old clay drainage system at the elementary school, and what we believe is happening is that it's deteriorating. So as it deteriorates, there's holes going in, and the unfortunate thing is, if something's breaking, we're gonna have to fix it.
Yep.
So that's gonna be an issue. But this is what we're seeing. So we're seeing these little holes appearing now around, and we're believing it's because of that clay drainage system.
Okay, so sorry for going all real time on you, but do we see this being a more extensive issue that maybe is?
We see it's something we're gonna have to trench out and fix.
Yeah, okay, so we'll have to spend a little bit of money.
It's
Probably
we'll get
on the agenda for the next facilities meeting.
Yeah, we're gonna figure this one out.
Yep, okay, cool. So we did have a phase 2 construction update. It's moving forward. We hope to have the asbestos abatement in the science rooms done over April break. Gonna move the tech room 2 weeks before the start of summer, so we can start construction in there. What else do we have in here? Oh, do you want me to go over this, or do you want Jim to go over this, or do you want you to go over this? The 2018 proposition stuff that we have to change.
I'm gonna go over that when we get, I can do it now if you want, or I can do it when we do it. It's up to you guys.
That's right. So it's on the agenda later,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so forthcoming on the agenda, we'll talk about a little bit of an issue that we have to have an update going out to voters because of the way some buckets of money are handled and where stuff's supposed to come out of. It's a totally clerical thing. We're not spending any more money. We're not. It's kind of a very normal thing. So we'll get into that then. We talked about the transportation facility, as we seem to always do, which is awesome. Frank took us through this is exciting. Like I'll be super excited when one day we have one. So Frank took us through what Berlin Central Schools did, and we had some pictures. And did we ever find out how much that cost?
It was on the voter referendum, and I remember quoting it at the meeting. I don't remember. I believe it was.
I don't think we had it at the meeting.
I believe the voter referendum was 750,000.
Yeah, so
don't quote me exactly on that, but it was not.
So that's what you said you thought.
Yeah, but it might have been a pre-existing location, so there might have been a slab already.
But either
there.
way, it was very inexpensive, and for what they did, it's amazing. It looked awesome. It would be the perfect kind of thing for us, and it would be super cool to go take a little field trip if and when that's appropriate to go see it in person. Because I'd love to, sort of kick the tires over there and see what it's like walking around. The pictures were great, though. I mean, it's
take a school bus over.
Oh yeah. Can Frank drive it?
There is a provision that I actually can drive.
That's why I asked. Yeah. We had a discussion on some facilities use protocols, and so now that we're getting towards spring, now that things are getting better, now that we are doing high-risk sports, allowing folks to use in the community our facilities, both indoor and outdoor, for sports. So we talked a little bit about the process around that, what we want it to look like. I mean, I think we reiterated the big thing there is that, we've talked about this at the public board meetings as well, right? If and when, we're letting our facility be used, that there's equity there in terms of, we don't want the rules to be different for groups using our facilities than for the student athletes who are using the facilities as well, right? So, just ensuring that all groups are following the same rules that our students are following, so it's fair. So things like, wearing masks all the time, whatever. And I think Frank, you mentioned we're going to update the contracts, right? Was where some of that language was going to go. It sounds like that's been done, or we're moving forward.
And we worked with those community groups, and every community group's been great.
Yeah,
really
I can imagine
understands
they're
it
going to
and
say, no, I don't want to. Yeah.
They absolutely agree with
And are we inserting our guidance in there, or how are we communicating that, I guess?
They will follow our guidance.
No, I know that they will, that's what we talked about, but how do they know what our guidance is? Right, we're
sharing it with them.
We're just sharing it with them, not as a part of the contract saying that this is the guidance.
No, we're having pre-meetings with them to go over it, and then they're giving us what their plan will be. So their plan, we're gonna approve it, and it matches our guidance.
So sort of align their plan against our.
And then everyone has clear communication, clear understanding, and nice little checks and balances.
That's awesome, so that's exciting stuff too. I think that was.
Yeah, and playground.
Oh yeah, there was playground, and I think we'll have future discussions about the playground. We didn't really make any decisions, mostly because it's sort of premature in that one. There's not that kids can't play in the snow, but it's nice.
We're opening the playground during the school day.
Oh, you are now?
We have, like I said, we have a plan already.
There we go.
To
But
go.
are the slides fixed? So
Slides getting
when we talked about
installed.
before, the slides are if you haven't been.
Slides getting installed. We
There
have
are
a
half
date on the
slides
slide
hanging
and
out there,
everything
so
else.
you can't really
So we
play.
have a plan for the day. It's the after school is where the issue, because there's no
Okay.
monitoring. So, kids have to wash their hands. We have to have it before, we have to have it after. After school, there's no monitoring. So that's something that I have a plan. I have some suggestions to bring up at the facilities committee. So
So we'll talk about that
Yep.
in a week or so.
Yep. Yeah, no, but our teacher aides actually helped Jeff Avenzio develop this plan
Oh, we were
in
talking about it.
December.
Yeah.
But, we could do it in December, but the teacher aides really are the ones that are overseeing it. Jeff utilized them to help develop this plan, and it's fantastic. And again, it's not full-blown, every single kid out there, because we can't do it that way. But, there's some clear expectations, so it's a good.
That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that'll be a big one.
And the playground site is fixed and supported, so it won't crack again, so.
Yep,
Fixed
that's
and made better.
I just noticed they were missing.
Yep.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it didn't look like it would be super safe with the half the tube sliding out.
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right,
thank you
that
for-
was our meeting. Any questions?
That's
No?
Great update, thank you. A lot of
All right.
work. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the right direction.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, Rachel, policy meeting?
Yeah, hi. We had a policy meeting last week, March 3rd, and it's kind of fitting to talk about it today. Today is March 8th, which is International Women's Day. And one of the issues brought out a lot of young women to email the board. But the first thing that came up was bathroom signage. One of the things that came up was bathroom signage to use for single-use bathrooms, to have them clearly marked as being used for either for anyone. So that one is coming up. That policy is coming up for a first read today. We also discussed, at the end of the meeting, we discussed education policy. That's something we had a meeting about, a workshop type of board meeting about earlier, and the committee members are going to each look at the board's input and develop different versions, and then we'll work from those different versions to work towards a policy that we think would fit the board. It might incorporate missions and goals as well as not just educational philosophy. And the third thing was a portion of the code of conduct, which is 5300, which is the dress code. And we are looking into it. We received email from a student earlier in the year, this calendar year, and we looked at the policy, and Frank worked with Jen and Laura Schmitz and Drax to look at how we could address it, because the way it's written, it does seem to have language that is not in the direction that we want to go, especially in light of the fact that we've just adopted a policy on inclusivity, equity, and diversity. So we received more than 20 emails from students, former students and current students, and we have a new language that we're looking at, and there are still some things that we want to look at before we bring that to the board for even a first read. But we want to see how other schools are handling their similar version of it. And also, we're still looking at the concept of wearing hats, and where is that a viable thing that kids can do, or where might it still be a challenge? So there are some little aspects that we're ironing out, but it was really compelling, especially today in the International Women's Day, to have heard from so many students addressing an issue of potential inequity. So I thank all the members of the administration and all of the people who share their voices. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, moving on.
Can I say one thing? Just as a question about how does a code of conduct, because it's not a policy in, say, like where we do a first read, then a second read, then a board resolution. So the way that a policy gets approved is it goes through all these different things, and then we do a read. And then when it's ready to go to the code of conduct, if you're making a change to your code of conduct, you have to do something called a hearing before your board meeting. So let's say we vet this, we go through it, we work through it, let's say it's now May, right? And May, you wanna make the change to the code of conduct, or June, you've already done your read, it's on for the board resolution. Prior to that, you do a hearing. So let's say 20 minutes beforehand, you do a hearing, you allow community contact. At that point in time, you get community feedback. After the hearing, then the board can then choose, yep, we're gonna approve the code of conduct, and you approve the whole aspect of the code of conduct. But you need to do a hearing prior to changing your code of conduct.
And
Yes.
normally that's annually?
Yeah,
So if.
well, typically code of conducts really don't change.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's very few and far between where you're making a major change to a code of conduct. You might change like small little wordings,
Yeah.
that stuff, you know, the small little tiny little like periods here or those things. It's the bigger substantive changes like this, that's where you have to say, no, we're allowing hats to be worn, right? That's a change. Or we're getting rid of tube tops. You can't, you know, wear them. Great. But then you do a hearing for those aspects of it.
But you're correct, we generally just review it annually, and there hasn't been a change in a really long time, so.
As part of the reorg activity.
Okay. So let's.
So that was it, and we have some things that we'll be looking at moving forward, but the policy committee is working on educational policy moving forward as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'd like to say I appreciate Rachel's persistence and respectful communications with all those student advocates. You know, there was I kept coming through all these different emails, and I thought, boy, you really were very responsive to them, and I think that helped a lot for them to feel as if they were being respected, and on behalf of the board, you represented us well, so thank you.
Oh, thank you, Tim, for those kind words. It was honestly, it was an honor to hear from folks.
Yeah.
So that it's why we are here to listen and to support.
Well, the other part of that was the letters themselves were very articulate and very compelling. And I was impressed with the people who were writing those letters to you or to the policy committee.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was good.
It speaks to our kids learning. I can't even speak, but their letters spoke to the way their well-written skill, their writing skills, and I'll stop there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. How about we group 7.1 and 7.2? Can I have a motion?
Move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Gotcha, Rachel. All right, 7.3, approval of resolution, Recapital project reserve. Frank, would you like to take that?
Yes, I will. All right. So I mentioned it's at the facilities committee, and Jim and I, when we were going over phase 2 of the project, now phase 1 is done, in phase 2, and we're going over the money aspect of it, something came up that we saw within the writing of how the bond was put out and the proposition was put out. Specific terminology was used in the 2018 proposition that stated that by voters that we approved was that the bond was written in a very specific way in dollar amount. It stated that $1.6 million would have been utilized of the 2012 capital reserve and $500,000 from the 2017 reserve, right? That's what was stated. What ended up happening though in that 2012, after you get to a certain amount in a reserve, say you cap out that reserve at 2 million, or say it's 1.8 million, if you start taking it away from that reserve, you can't put money back into it. It's gone. You don't get to use it like a checking account. You don't put in 1.8 million, you take out 0.2 and then you put it back in again. It doesn't work that way. Well, from 2012, done appropriately, what ended up happening was, there was propositions done for like the building of the bridge and the fixing of the bridge and other issues. So money was depleted from that 2012 reserve. So there wasn't technically $1.6 million in that reserve. The 2017 reserve is flush. There's enough money in there to be able to cover what's in the 2012. What the proposition should have stated was we'd use up to 1.6 million in this and up to 1 in the 2017.
So then we would have had flexibility in doing so. Right now, it's not. So this proposition basically states that, you know, we're gonna take money out of 2017 and be able to use it. We have all the money. The money's already there. There's no change in any of that. We're not taking more money. We're not adding more money. It's district money already in reserves. But we just have 1.2 million in the 2012. We need about $500,000 from the 2017 to cover that. We have more than enough money in the 2017 to do so. So that's why this proposition has to go out. Money's already there, basically like a clerical error in the writing of it, and we just need to fix it. And we've worked with, just so you all know, we worked with our bond attorney, let's see, Jim, let's name the people who were involved in this. Our bond attorney, our external claims auditor, the Bonadio group, our attorney, and Jim and myself, and we spent a good 2 months working through this process of making sure we had a full understanding of everything that happened and how to fix this clerical error. And this was the recommendation from all of those people together on how to get it done appropriately.
Great, so we'll have clean books.
Yeah,
sounds like.
clean books.
Okay.
You'll need to take a sleep.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So can I have a motion to move that?
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, and then Board of Education policy that Rachel mentioned, this is the first read, so we won't be voting on that tonight. 7.5, approval of resolution in the pilot program. Did you want to speak briefly to that?
Yep, so solar project and tax law coming out, and so we were notified that there is a potential solar project coming into the area. I believe it's a 5 megawatt solar project. Albany County is looking at doing a pilot as well. It's payment in lieu of taxes. So we have to, if we want to be able to do that, there's a certain time frame that we say to them, no, this is something we're looking at doing. And so we have to file for the pilot with them and at least give them notification that we're looking at doing the pilot. So this is just a notification. They tell us that it's going in. We tell them that they would want to do a payment in lieu of taxes. And then after that point, our lawyers and Jim and myself, then the negotiation starts about how much money that's going to be and the length of the term of it. The goal is to get adequate funds for the property that's coming in.
Good news, get those funds. Thank you. Can I have a motion?
I just ask a question can you give a general idea of how much money we're talking about?
Well, you can go by the NYSERDA megawatt per megawatt, but I don't have an opportunity right now because it's still in the negotiation process and how you can do. I've done pilots where you have done X amount of money per megawatt and you'll be able to get that for a certain amount of years. I've also done pilots with a house agreement attached to it where you get money for the megawatt and then you also have program and scholarship. So I've done a pilot where you have X and then they've done grant funding for school science programs or STEAM programs. So then it's like a grant funded program as well. So they give you X amount of money for that. So really, I don't have a say because it's still a negotiation process that we have to work through and we're right at the beginning.
Does this require the board to sign off on it?
Yeah, I mean.
Not this, I understand.
Yeah.
But when it's negotiated, there's a dollar amount and it's known, does that require us
Yeah,
to be
it's
a
a
part of
resolution.
it?
It's a resolution.
Yep.
Will be a second one. Okay, so did.
I interrupted you, so I think you had a motion in a second, I'm not sure though.
Did I?
Not yet.
No.
Okay, can I have a
Okay, sorry about that. I
No.
so move.
Thank you. Take a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, opportunity for the board to be heard? Okay, dates to remember. Our next meeting will be April 12th. We'll see if we'll start at 6:45 or 6, depending on if we're gonna have any kind of a budget adoption or anything like that. So if everyone could tentatively just mark their calendars for 6 o'clock start time, just in case, so if we have to fill anything in, that would be April 12th. And that will be followed by a regular meeting. Okay, we have no reason for executive session this month. So can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move it.
Second, second, all in favor?
Bye.
Okay. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hoping to be able to see you guys in person sometime.